everyone and welcome. My name is Sasha Quadri and I'm delighted to welcome you to our 10th virtual masterclass on communication in a COVID-19 world. From brands to business leaders to employees, communication is both the most talked about and least developed soft skill. Often it's not what you say, but how you're seen and heard, which influences the response. Well, today's showcase will feature 3 speakers from the world of brand, business, and people who will place communication within the context of both a physical and a virtual COVID-19 world. And after the speakers have finished, there'll be a Q&A session, so please submit your questions to the Q&A box below, and at the end, our experts will answer your questions. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce our first speaker today. It's a gentleman called Tim Dorsett, and Tim has been at Innocent for 7 years with just one mission: to help people work better and go home happy. Working as the internal communications manager for Innocent Drinks, Tim will share tangible and achievable tools and techniques that any business could put into practice at their place of work. And whether you're focusing on creating community and teams, being innovative when there isn't money to spend, or generally creating the right business environment. So welcome, Tim.
Hi everybody, look at this. I've got my own Innocent backdrop. I'm actually based in our northwest London office, Fruit Towers, so it's great to be here with you today. So yeah, as was said, I've been at Innocent for just over 7 years now, and my mission is to help people work to the best of their ability and go home happy. And we'll come on to that going home section a little bit later. But for those of you that don't know, Innocent was set up by 3 best friends. And I think that's really important for the narrative of the organisation and the culture that we have. They were 3 best friends that went to Cambridge University together. They did lots of club nights and big social activities that they set up together. So when they left Cambridge, they knew that they wanted to set up a business for themselves. And the first business the 3 best friends came up with, these Cambridge educated gents, was electric baths. And the idea was that you would set the temperature of your water, the volume of water that you wanted, and the time that you wanted your bath. Now, unbelievably, nobody invested in this awful idea. So what they did was they went on a skiing holiday, and they did what any good skiers do, and they got very, very drunk while après skiing. And the next morning they went to the shops. They wanted to have a drink that would help them feel like they could get through this awful hangover. And there was nothing on the shelf. There was absolutely nothing on that shelf that made them feel like they were going to live through a hangover. And that is genuinely where the idea of Innocent was born. Now, what they did was they came back to the UK, they set up a stand at Parsons Green Jazz Festival. And on this stand, there were 2 bins. And above this, it said, should we give up our day jobs to make smoothies? And at the festival, they sold all these smoothies throughout the weekend. And the story goes that at the end of the weekend, all of the cups were in the yes bin. So they did. The next day they went in and they quit their jobs. And already that tells you that listening to the other people and the people around you can be so powerful and effective. And that is really where Innocent was born. Now, something that we have always done is we have underpinned our business with our purpose, our vision, and our values. And that really is not just another company that shoves it on the wall so that when people come around for tours, you can say, look at our purpose, our vision, and our values. You don't just find it on our website. We really do live and die by those points. So our purpose is to make delicious natural drinks that help people live well and die old. Our vision is to be the Earth's favourite little healthy food and drinks company. And our values are to be natural, entrepreneurial, responsible, commercial, and generous. And we as a business feel that our culture is all pinned by those values. We are a people and culture-led business. So if we aren't really putting our people at the forefront of what we do, and we're not communicating with each other, there's no connection with the business and what we do. So as I said, my job was, or sort of is, to make sure that Fruit Towers, our office in Northwest London, is a great place to be. We want people to come in excited to do the jobs they do. We want to enable them to be able to work to the best of their abilities and go home with a smile on their face. That was easy at the beginning of this year. We have a fantastic office. There's AstroTurf on the walls, on the floors. We had a fantastic time. And then we also, at the end of last year, spent hundreds of thousands of pounds completely transforming our building. We took out 50% of the desks because everyone used to have their own solo working space. We took all of those out to create a collaborative hot desking system, which as of March of this year essentially became illegal because of COVID-19. We had to ask everyone to move from one central space where people can work, communicate and collaborate together to set up 400 individual communities, 400 individual cultures where, as you can see from the background behind me, the brand really sings true through this building. How could we connect with people and make sure that they feel like we need them to stay true to our purpose, our vision and our values? And the only way to do that was to communicate. So what did we do? The first thing we did was we looked at our tone of voice. What does it mean to be innocent? We say it means you are honest, you are natural, and you are engaging. And the reason we say those three words is because they are individual for every single person in this business. We want you to be natural. We want you to bring yourself to work. We want that best version of yourself. That doesn't lose sight, whether you are working at home, working in our French office, our Irish office, our UK office, or as we are all now, satellited. And what we have wanted to do is we want to make people smile. We want to make people feel like they are listened to. We, as the comms team and the culture team, we're as much as an employee going through this as anybody else. Asking those questions, taking it right back to the bare bones. Don't try and solve the problem. Let your community solve that problem. Asking them and treating them like a human. For me, that's the most important thing we did with our comms when we went into COVID. It was taking away the work stuff and it was asking how they are. Responding to that, really listening and trying to support those people takes the culture from your solo central place and makes it feel like a community. Great communication creates community. And whether that be virtually, via Microsoft Teams, Zoom as we're using now, a telephone, a text, make that an open forum. Make that something that people really can join to. We did lots of things that other businesses have done. We did Zoom quizzes, we had a jukebox guy that came and sang any song that you wanted, lots of those things. Every team really took their responsibility to make sure that everyone felt connected. The hardest thing I had to do this year was to cancel our summer event. Every year we take all 600 members of the Innocent staff, so that's everyone across 14 offices around Europe, and we take them for a 3-day event somewhere in Europe. So that's a half-day conference and then a 3-day party, essentially. And we had to cancel it for the first ever time. We wanted to recognise that this moment that we all have, again, to communicate, to be together, has lost. And we wanted to recognise the hard work, and people deserve a moment to celebrate. So we went through so many different ideas of what we could do. What is it going to be that's going to help us get to a place where people feel recognised? Do we send them a box of treats? Do we send them an eye mask? Do we send them subscriptions to things? And we boiled it right down to people want to be thanked. People want that ultimate thing that they have been sacrificing during this time, and that is time. How you recognise that the hours that people have been putting in and the pressure that people have been put under, recognise that we as a business are grateful. So the best way for us, we felt, to communicate that was we gave everybody an extra day's holiday. Now, that might not seem like a lot, but it's incredibly sustainable. It doesn't cost the business any much, and it's equal for everyone. Everyone at Innocent is going through the same thing. Whether you are an IT apprentice, whether you are the CEO, we are all going through something together. So we need to celebrate and recognise that togetherness and create equality around that success. And that's really important for us. With external communications as a brand, we did what we do really well. For those of you that follow us on Instagram, Facebook or Twitter, you will know that we are best at putting absolute nonsense out on the internet. That is what we're best at. And so that is what we did. We didn't want to go down the unprecedented times kind of status. We know everyone's doing that. So how do we connect with our drinkers? How do we communicate with the people out there? By staying true to who we are, by going back to our tone of voice, be honest, be natural, and be engaging. Be who we are. So on the first day, we put out a poem. I'm going to read a tiny little bit of that poem for you. The end of that said, "We're going to keep looking after everyone who works here. We're going to give away every spare drink to someone who needs it. We're going to try our hardest to bring people together. And we're going to keep posting nonsense on the internet to try and make you laugh." And that's what we did. We rerouted hundreds of thousands of drinks to the people that needed it most during the time. It didn't feel right on our social media to try and sell drinks. That's not what people need during a global pandemic. We don't want to encourage people going to the shop. We want to encourage happiness. We want to encourage connection, community. And again, the best way to do that is to communicate on a human level. So for me, the last thing I wanted to say was, we had a really wonderful story from our CEO. Our CEO, Douglas Lamont, has been at Innocent for about 9 years, very nearly 10 years actually. And he put together a video to say hello and thank you to everybody. It was just a little iPhone video, sent it around to everyone. And in that, he told us a story of being at the first board meeting after we'd asked to go into lockdown. And Douglas said that during that meeting, he was there talking to the leaders of his business, going, we are about to go into some really tough times as a business. We're going to really struggle here. And he heard a knock at the door. And his daughter came in and whispered in his ear, Daddy, I've wet my knickers. Now, that might not sound much for communication, but at that moment, again, our senior leadership team recognized that everyone is going through something here. Everyone is going to have, whether it be their daughter wetting their pants or someone working on a bedside table, to be open, to be recognizing the work that people are doing, not trying to brush it under the carpet. Treat people as human beings, because in this situation, that's absolutely what we are. We are all going through exactly the same thing. So treat people equally, say thank you and mean it. This is hopefully the worst thing that we will ever go through. And we want to share the good bits and we want to share the bad bits. So for me, working for this business as long as I have, and the pride that I think clearly I have for working for this business, is because throughout this, I've been treated as a human, not a member of staff, not another number on the pay grade, a human. I am Tim and I've gone through stuff, and I've been encouraged to tell my team that I'm here to listen to them, to ask them how they're going. And that's the same for our drinkers. The people out there are going through way more things than which smoothie to buy. Communicate with people on a human level. That is where you get connection. That is where you get community. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tim. So interesting to hear how it's been going down at Innocent for the last few months. And I think anyone who has kids or small people in their household has had the experience of being burst in on, whether it's with wet knickers or just because your child wants to appear on camera, like my 7-year-old does frequently. So thank you so much for that. Lots of questions coming in. Please keep them coming in and we'll get to those at the end. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, who is Olympian Kate Richardson-Walsh MBE, and she captained the GB women's hockey teams for 13 years. As the most capped British hockey player in history, Kate also made history in becoming one half of the only same-sex married couple to win an Olympic medal on the same team. No competition there then. As GB captain, Kate will share how to construct a strong team philosophy, cultivate a collective culture of behaviour, create a sense of common purpose, and inspire a distributed leadership structure. Welcome, Kate.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Sasha. Good afternoon, everybody. It's my absolute pleasure to share a little bit of our world, our story, and hopefully it'll resonate with you. When I spoke to Dan about the theme communication, I had a giggle straight away, because the first thing that sprang to mind was, as a player in the GB hockey team, communication was like buzzword bingo that we would kind of throw out if ever the coach asked a question. Especially those ones who were having a little doze off, it was always a good one to shout out. Now I'm a coach and I hear the players saying it back to me, but actually the more I've reflected on it, the more I absolutely know that actually communication is the answer and the solution to almost all of our problems and all of our issues. It's just taken me a while to fully realise that. And I think when I look back through my career, I think how we use communication to really thrive as individuals and as a collective team. And it also really navigated us out of some really dark times, some really difficult situations. We won an Olympic bronze medal in London 2012, which was just amazing. And we felt like we were riding on a high. And then we had a couple of really difficult years. We had a lot of change to manage, some real uncertain times. The pressure started to grow and everything started to crumble. All that brilliant culture that we created from 2009 to 2012 just started to deteriorate. And our coach, who had empowered us back in 2009, Danny Kerry, to drive, to build, to own our culture from the foundations up, to build our vision, to build our values, to build our behaviours, to own them, to drive them, to take responsibility for them. When he came back in 2015, we were a wounded group. We were in a difficult place, and everything that we did from that point on was centred around communication. As a group of 31 players and our staff, as I said, we were empowered to build our culture. And so our vision for the Rio Olympic Games was be the difference, create history, inspire the future. And the values that underpin that were we are one team, we are winners, be alive. And communication was woven through all of those values and that vision entirely. It wasn't just about talking, it was about listening, it was about our body language, it was about all those external bits of communication that we maybe subconsciously are just picking up every single day in and amongst that group. Because we've been in that difficult, dark period for a couple of years, we needed to be really explicit with each other about what we meant by those values. As has already been said by Tim, there's no good having lovely things on a wall. This needed to live and breathe in absolutely everybody for this to work. And so we talked and discussed and debated and argued and passionately fought for what we believed the most pertinent behaviours were that would underpin those values. And we created our behaviour statements. And I'm going to share with you now our behaviour statement for We Are One Team. Just listen out to all of the references to communication. We are one team. We respect each other. We accept differences. It's okay to listen. You don't have to talk. We belong to one team. I've got your back and you've got mine. We stand in this bubble together. Belong now, belong forever. There is no bullshit and there are no excuses. I'm connected to you. We wear the same kit. We're tight. We talk to each other. We share with each other. We stamp out fires early. Talk to me. Listen to me. We share the load. Together, we have strength. We are one team. I get goosebumps. I can't tell you how many times I've read that. I can do it off by heart, but it looks a bit weird. But it gives me goosebumps every time I read that out, because I'm remembering moments, instances, conversations between players or members of staff or between a group where those behaviours were not on a page anymore. They were in real life. They were us. They were in us. They were part of us. You could see it and hear it and feel it in everything that we did. And one of the behaviours I think particularly stuck out for me when I thought about communication, and it's we stamp out fires early. Because every group of every size has tiny little sparks being set off on a daily basis, and we actively want and need those sparks. We need that diversity of thought. We need that difference of opinion to get the best solutions and get the best outcomes. So whilst we were actively trying to seek that out, we also realised that we needed to create space for those differences, to really make sure that everybody had the opportunity to be heard, to be listened, to be understood, so we could get the best out of everybody in that group and therefore get the best out of the team. So we talked in every which way you can possibly imagine. We were listened to. We had players meetings without staff. We had loads of meetings with our staff. We had a leadership group that was voted in by the team to lead on our culture. We would meet on a regular basis. Each of us would have a buddy group, 5 or 6 players that was strategically chosen so that we could meet in a more intimate setting, creating those safe spaces where people feel they could be absolutely themselves, be vulnerable, be honest, be open. And that's exactly what we wanted for everybody in that team. And it was really challenging, brilliant, and I miss it, probably the thing I miss the most, but those elements were everything in that team. Going into Rio, this helped us more than I could ever imagine. We decided as a group, so the squad that was selected out of that 31 decided to come off social media for the 2 weeks of the Olympics. So actually to keep our communication bubble a little bit tighter, we gave our Brazilian phone numbers to the people that we wanted to have them, so not any old person that had our number could message us. We kept ourselves to ourselves, just focusing on enjoying the moment, relishing this opportunity, being and experiencing it together. So we come off social media, brilliant. We get out to Rio, and the BBC, love them, said that somebody in the team is going to write a social media blog. Now, had we not had these safe spaces, this ability to really talk and listen and share, whatever the situation, I think in past teams, this would have just been one of those things that would have niggled away, and it would have created a little bit of conversation maybe between a couple of roommates, and it might have been an apartment conversation over a cup of tea. And, you know, it probably would have centred around this player who'd been chosen and, you know, why is she the favourite? We've all heard those conversations. We've all been part of those conversations. We've probably even started some of those conversations. And often they're left there and that's where it is. But I genuinely believe that as human beings, we're emotive creatures and we store some of this negative energy away. And when we least want it to or least expect it to, out this comes. And for us, that could be in the middle of a game. It could cost us a goal, a game, an Olympic medal. So actually, let's try and mitigate that. Let's just create as many opportunities as possible for people to talk and share. So every morning, without fail, we'd go to breakfast together. We'd sit on our table that we always sat on because sports people are superstitious. We'd come back, we'd do our stretches and our exercises, and then we'd sit in our circle as we always sat, so you can make eye contact with people when they're talking, so you're connected with them, that you're listening to them. And before I or another member of the leadership group could bring up this blog, one of the team members just put their hand up and said, you know what, I'm really not happy that this player has been chosen to write this blog. And we had a brilliant, very difficult, emotive, raw conversation in the circle. It was quite a big day. We had an Olympic match that day against Australia, first game of the Olympics. But yet here we were having this conversation and it was brilliant. And together we talked, openly debated and came up with a solution as a squad. And that for me was just the epitome of what we were about, of what we created. A safe space where everybody could talk, listen, be understood, and be the very best version of themselves for the good of that team, knowing that inevitably it would help us as a team be the success that we wanted to be. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kate. I actually had goosebumps there when you were saying the things that you know off by heart. It's really actually very powerful. Thank you so much for sharing your perspective. Well, our final speaker is an expert in behavioural persuasion and influential communication. Lee Warren blends together psychology and sales with his background as a performer to teach others the secrets to being an outstanding business communicator. In an ever cutthroat industry, Lee will give business leaders the skills for making that all-important impact. Welcome, Lee.
Thank you very much, Sasha. Hello, everyone. It's very lovely to be invited. And I'm a bit intimidated following those two brilliant speeches. They're really inspiring, aren't they? Equally, I had goosebumps. So you just heard my background's in really in behavioral persuasive psychology, and it comes from two worlds really. One is sales. I was sales director of a large media firm for quite a long time, but I've also been a performer, a professional magician and mind reader for many years. So you can think of me as an affordable Derren Brown for our brief time together today. So I just wanted to get into a little bit, not just the overall theme of communication, but really what makes great communication and what makes really engaging communication, and particularly in this, this year 2020. Because if there's one, obviously we've learned lots of things, but if there's one thing we've learned about communication, it's that so much of it has shifted so fast, and so much of it really is about attention, especially in the virtual environment. And I think it's fair to say that online, pretty much everybody has the attention span of a 3-year-old and the memory of a 90-year-old. So people who are going to adopt, better communication skills really have to learn how to get attention, how to keep it, how to stand out, how to be memorable, how to be persuasive. So I've got a few very speedy ideas for you that will help to do that. And they're based around a little acronym, which I'll show you, an acronym I rather like, HAMPIE, H-A-M-P-I-E. And the idea behind this acronym is very simple. It's very easy to understand, but the practical implications and application of it are pretty fabulous, I think. So the first bit of HAM really stands for hearts and minds, all right? HAM, hearts and minds. And the idea here, and I think this reflects really back on both the two previous speeches that we heard, is that if you're going to be someone who communicates with other people, and whether this is one-to-one in a feedback session, or whether this is speaking to a room of 20 or writing an email or doing a presentation, it's always wise in communicating to really get an emotional connection first before you hit people with the mind stuff, with the data, content, statistics, and so on. And over again, and particularly this year, the mistake we see people making, especially in business communication, is trying to convince people with processes, systems, stats, content, data. And if we know anything about the world recently, it's that facts and data are not that persuasive. It's really an emotional connection which is persuasive. Now, that's a very simple idea, but think about it in terms of quite how deeply it affects our behavior. If you and I met, you know, and I said to you, which do you think is healthier, better for you, spinach or chocolate and sugary things, I'd be fairly willing to bet you'd probably say spinach was healthier, and I think it is too. But if I've got 50 of you in a room and said, all right, how many of you eat spinach more often than you eat chocolate and sugary things, I'd be fairly willing to bet that would be a minority of people, because we don't really act in accordance with information. We tend to act in accordance. We get influenced more by emotional stuff. And I'm speaking for myself. I just like chocolate more than I like spinach. And, you know, one of you could come up to me in the street and think of how difficult it would be to change my behavior just using information, just communicating with me using facts. You could see me in the street eating a chocolate bar, and you could come up and, keeping your government mandated 2-meter distance, obviously, you could come up to me and say, Lee, don't eat that chocolate bar. It's 2,000 calories. And my brain will say, well, it's only 2,000 calories, right? I will literally change the shape of the universe to suit that emotional prejudice that I've already made. So always trying to engage people emotionally first is such a key tool in communicating. I want to be clear, it's hearts and minds. I'm not saying the mind stuff isn't important. I'm talking about the order in which you do it. And then PIE, P-I-E, stands really for 3, again, very simple ideas. P is for pictures, and pictures in its broadest sense. What we see again and again, and in our 2 previous speeches there, you heard it again, it's stuff that's visual that tends to affect us as human beings, that tends to move us, that tends to be memorable and credible. Stories, narratives, obviously images, pictures, easy comparisons, imagine if, ... what would it be like if, ... And when we meet people who are great communicators, whether that's in writing or in speaking, what we see over and over again is they're often using very visual language. They're often saying things like, look, where we need to be by Christmas is ... Do you remember when ... So pictures, visual language tends to work really well. The I stands for interest. And again, a very straightforward idea here. If you want to be a great communicator, you have to relentlessly focus on what is interesting to the people you're communicating with. One of the early things you learn as a magician, and it's a really strange fact, this is the only person who doesn't see a magic trick is the magician doing it, right? The magician sees all the stuff that's happening backstage. You see all the secrets and tricks. So one of the skills you have to develop as a magician very early in terms of communicating, getting your idea across, is you have to be able to see the magic trick from the point of view of your audience. And this is one of the key skills of communicators, is really focusing on not what you want to say, but what other people want to hear. And then the last one, E, is for enthusiasm, probably my favorite word in the English language. The idea here is very simple. If you want to be a great communicator, you have to believe your own messages. You have to believe it deep down, and particularly in this virtual environment, because weirdly, this online thing, it's sort of more intimate, actually, than the real world. We're a little bit closer to the camera. It's easier for people to hear the tone of our voices or to see what's going on in our eyes. And people are very good at knowing when we don't really believe our own message deep down. So really what I'm talking about is not just what you're saying, but really how you're framing what you're saying or how you're framing what you're writing. Framing is a very powerful idea in communication. It's basically the idea of, if I've got a glass of water, cheers, you assumed it's water. If I've got a glass of water, is it half full or is it half empty? Well, it's both and it's neither all at the same time. You'll just see it differently depending on how I choose to frame it. I came across a wonderful piece of framing recently on Twitter. As you know, in the United Kingdom, we're all mad about elections. We love elections. And there's a Twitter account that reposts the results of elections and polls and surveys. And this poll was put on Twitter. I found it really fascinating. On a certain day, just over 1,000 people were asked the following question. In the United Kingdom, should we reduce the voting age from 18 to 16? Notice the language. Should we reduce the voting age from 18 to 16? As you'll see, 56% of people said, no, we should not. On the same day, the same number of people were asked the following question. okay, should we give 16 and 17-year-olds the right to vote? And this time, 52% of people said, yes, we should. You're intelligent people, you've got the point by now. It's exactly the same question, right? It's exactly the same question, communicated, framed in two totally different ways, and you get two very different results when you do that. Now, we live in the real world. Of course, humans aren't robots. You can't always predict how people are going to react, but great communicators know the way that you frame your communication can be often as important as the communication itself. Now, in terms of you, in terms of yourselves, one of the best ways of framing anything for other people is to always think in a certain way. And the nice way to remember this is to imagine you're at a networking event and just in your own mind, answer the following question. Imagine I've walked up to you and I've said, hello, what do you do? Right, hello, that dreadful networking question. Now, when you ask 100 people this, you sort of get back lots of job titles usually. So you get things like marketing manager, finance director, and so on. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong about that. But if you think about it deeply, that's a very poor way actually of framing what we do, because often our job titles are not what we do, they're just the method we use to deliver value. So my job title is keynote speaker. Well, so what? That just describes the fact I speak. It doesn't really describe the value that I deliver by speaking. So I developed a technique which is great fun to use, and it's to fill in the second half of this sentence. At the heart of what I do is a simple idea, ... Obviously, you don't say ... right? You fill in the ... has happened. But what this does, it drives you sort of towards value rather than processes and systems. And if you can do this with your job title, you can do it with anything. I'll give you a very quick example from my background as a performer. When I used to do magic a lot, I used to do a lot of weddings, and they're lovely gigs to work at. And about a year before their wedding, I would always have the sales meeting with the wedding couple, and they would always say, Lee, what kind of tricks would you do at our wedding? Now, if you think about this in terms of real communication, they're not actually asking that question, I don't think, because that's just a system level question. That's a process level question. They're really asking about trust. I think they're really saying, can we trust you? This is the most important day of our lives. Can we trust you? Now, if I don't understand that, I'm going to answer at the level of fact, at the level of information. And I'm going to say, well, I do card tricks and coin tricks and mind reading tricks. And they'll say, well, thank you very much for that emotionally unengaging information. We will speak to some of your competitors and go with whoever's cheapest. Or I could use this technique instead. I've never said this out loud to a wedding couple. I'll just do this tongue in cheek for fun today. But when a wedding couple say, well, what kind of tricks would you do at our wedding? I could say, well, it's not really about the tricks, you know. At the heart of what I do is a simple idea. I'll make your wedding much better than your sister's was. I've never actually said that out loud to a wedding couple, but I hope it made you smile. But even though that's a really facetious example, a really tongue-in-cheek example, there are two really important things in that answer. One is it does speak directly to value. Who doesn't want the best wedding anybody's had? And the other is it's visual. It's easy to understand. You don't need to do any mental work to understand that answer. And that's why I hope lots of you smiled when you heard that answer. And it's a strange thing. Things that are easy to understand are easier to believe. Messages that are easy to picture get remembered more. They get referred more. So it's one of the key skills to be able to do. So in my very brief time together, I hope that's given you two ideas. One is stick to ham pie whenever you can, stick to ham pie. And the other is always try and frame your communication as well as you can. Get emotional connection and go for value as often as possible. Those are my ideas for you today. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you very much. And I'll hand back to Sasha.
Great. Thank you so much, Lee, for that very engaging presentation. Rather disappointed you haven't done a magic trick for us today, but hey, we'll have to get that later. And top marks for the graphics. I think, you know, Tim and Kate, next time you need to work on that a bit more. But we're going to bring Tim and Kate back on now because we've had lots of questions coming through. I'm going to start with a general one, and whoever wants to jump in, go for it. And you touched on this also, Lee, when you were talking about, you know, the connection that you can create. The question is, how do you build that personal connection virtually?
I'll go off of what Lee said. Honestly, building that connection, you've got to create the empathy of understanding that the person you're with is going through exactly the same thing as you are, and talking about the audience or who that person you're communicating with. And if it is a form of communication, then you are creating an audience or a rapport in that way. How do you want it to come across? It's not just what is it that I need to tell them, not is it just what the information I've got to give, but actually thinking, how is this going to land? How do I want them to receive it? What do you want your audience to know? What do you want them to feel? And what do you want them to do from this bit of communication? Will make sure that it really does land and be more open and personal.
Okay, thank you. Kate, Lee?
Yeah, I mean, I used to talk a lot about taking the temperature in the room, which I think when you're in an environment, when you're with people in the same room, I think you get that sense of body language, volume of kind of dialogue of people talking. You can feel people's energy, and I think that's a little bit harder virtually, but I think that's what we need to be able to try and do, is to just assess, where are we at right now energy wise, how many Zoom calls have we been on today, where do we just need to just park that for 5 minutes and just play shuffle all songs on your phone and just see what pops up, and just keep trying to take that temperature in different ways, just to check in with people and see where they're at. Definitely.
Absolutely. Lee?
Yeah, I think I agree. Was the word rapport in the question? Is that how do you build?
It was where was the question again? Sorry.
Was it how do you get engagement, or was it rapport?
How do you integrate and communicate with new employees who you have never met?
Oh, that's a different one. That's.
Oh no, hang on. Sorry, there's so many questions coming through. It's just trying to find the one.
Well,
it wasn't rapport. How do you build that personal connection virtually?
So, I think there's a few things that are emerging. There's a few opportunities in the virtual world that are emerging. And one is and I think this goes back to what Tim was saying right at the beginning, which is there's an opportunity for honesty here, like we've never seen before in the world. And when has humanity ever faced exactly the same problem at the same time? The whole globe is facing the same problem. Not even in World War II was this true, right? So there's such an opportunity for honest connection. But also what I've seen, and I never would have predicted this in advance, I think in some ways getting connection is becoming often easier in this environment, partly because time is more limited. So many of us are getting to what matters much more quickly now, which in itself builds some more connection, I think. But the other is you also have control of the environment much more. So for instance, I've got a bookcase behind me and lights because my product is information. I want to, that's sort of the connection I want to make with people. Whereas in the speech marks, the real world, it's so hard to, you're walking into other people's environments so often. So I think there are ways you can do it well, actually.
Absolutely. Kate, there's another question. I'd like to start with you on this one, especially because you talk so much about, the importance of teamwork. How do you communicate with people who don't fully buy into the team?
Yeah, I love that question. And it was something I probably changed my mind on throughout my career. I think in the beginning of my career, I was a bit hard-assed, and I was a bit like, if you're not going to join in with us, if you don't want to do what we're doing, then go. And then actually, over my period of my career, I kind of realized you need those people. You need those people that kind of sit on the boundaries and push the boundaries and make you think in a different way, and actually challenge the way things are done. And although that's going to make me feel really uncomfortable and have to check in with my ego quite a lot, it's actually really important. And actually it was for me then an understanding of kind of energy give and energy take, and just that balance of how much energy are they taking out of the group and how much energy they're bringing to the group. And as long as we can even that out and balance it out over time, I think it's always worth just bringing them in, compromising, listening, seeing things from their perspective, and using those mavericks to the very best of their ability. So that's the kind of way I would answer that question now. I'm a bit older and maybe a bit wiser.
And do you have any kind of personal examples from being a coach where you've had that situation come up?
Lots. I'll maybe not talk as a coach because there's only one group of players that I've coached, and so they'll know it's one of them. But I think there's definitely been times where, just something really simple, like we've, decided as a GB team we're going to train with red t-shirts on today, or only red or blue because that's what everybody has. And yes, previously we had really lovely white t-shirts, but not everybody has them, so we're not going to wear them. And there would always be at least one person who would want to wear that lovely white t-shirt, even though we'd agreed that that's not what we're going to wear. And so I think it'd be really easy to say, no, go away, go and get that red or blue t-shirt, and just shout at them and at the end of it. But actually just having a conversation, understanding why they want to wear that t-shirt and not the red or blue t-shirt, what that means to them, that maybe that sense of individuality, wanting to to show who they are, and maybe that battle that they're having. I think it's just opening up that conversation and listening to why people do the things they do, because they're doing them for a reason. And I think, again, it took me a long time to realise that, but that's just one example.
No, that's fascinating. Tim, putting it into more of a business and a corporate context, as an internal communications manager, how do you communicate then with people who don't fully buy into the team?
Well, again, yeah, for me, it comes right back to we do recruit on our values, and we recruit the right people. We have a wonderful phrase that we stole from the guy that used to be head of talent from Apple, which is, we'd rather have a hole than an arsehole. Hope I can say that on here. And the idea being that we'd rather have a gap in our team than fill it with the wrong person. So again, my team, as the culture team, it's our job to make sure the people that are working really hard and are spending long hours and doing, half of the job that needs to be filled is able to work and be happy doing so. So if that person's working in my team or is in a project that I'm working on and they are being, with butting heads, what is the value they are bringing? Why are they in this team? Let's find again, boiling it right back down, not where are we not meeting? Where are we going to join? Where are we going to agree and work it from there? Because again, to the point that Kate made, that they're probably going to broaden our knowledge. They're giving us another challenge. We don't just want yes people that are going to make exactly the same decisions. As a business, you want to grow, you want to challenge, you want to build new ideas, and there will be value in that person there, in their opinion.
Absolutely. Lee, what are your thoughts on this one?
I think it's, I think both those answers are great. And gosh, if you're coaching a sports team, there's no hiding there, is there? You must know so much more about it than most of the planet, I would think. I think what's happening, I think Kate's absolutely right about, you need people who perhaps appear difficult, because you don't really know where the center is without the extremes, right? So often teams can balance themselves. And I think also that thing about finding out what either the value or the worth is in each people and trying to bring that out or put people in the right roles, because it might seem like it, but very few people wake up in the morning thinking, I'd like to be a really irritating member of a team today, right? That's my goal for the day. It's quite rare, I suspect. And what's particularly this year, because everything's reconfigured so much and because people are finding different strengths so much. One of the things I've noticed is, this is the year of the introvert, right? The Zoom call year. I've done keynotes where, I've never had such interesting questions as this year. Because the people who would never dream of putting their hand up in a room of 100 people can type a question into a chat bar, for example. So sometimes I think it's really true that performance can dictate environment. Environment can dictate performance. So sometimes I think perhaps it can be simple as putting people in a different environment or changing things around them to bring out their strengths.
Absolutely. And actually, Lee, there's a question specifically for you here. How would you capture the attention of senior leadership teams to expand on what you've just talked about, to keep their attention for a longer piece?
What a great question. So there are two, as a quick answer, there are two things. One is focus, sorry to repeat myself, but focus relentlessly on what is interesting to them, right? Particularly with senior leadership teams. And the second thing is focus on time. Right? The big problem they have is time. So anything you can do that gets your message across in a short amount of time, or where you can break your message down into stages so that there's not either a lot of commitment or a lot of time required to listen to the message, that tends to work really well. Basically this year, there seem to be three big needs that are emerging in terms of how we communicate with other people. And the first one is the need to be heard and understood. So, and I think all of us are saying the same thing in this way today. So you have to let senior leadership teams know, I get it. I know what your world is like. I know it's chaos. I know all your priorities and problems have changed. Here's something that speaks to these new problems and priorities. The second need is the need to be stable and in control, because chaos 2020. So anything you can do that gives senior leadership back some control, back some stability, it can be a winner in terms of getting your message across. And the third is the need to feel significant and special, like you still matter. What you do still has meaning. So if you can get any of that into your communication, you're more likely to be onto a winner as well.
Absolutely. And I think Tim touched on that when he was doing his presentation about being Tim, not just being a member of staff, and how important that was to him. And Tim, a question that I think could be more relevant for you, which is how do you balance communications both internally and externally when a redundancy program is taking place over several months? Not that I'm saying that's happening at Innocent, but
again, that it's not happening at Innocent. But what I can say is that we are open, and we have been talking about exactly how the business is doing at every possible opportunity. We've not promised anything that we don't know. We haven't over-delivered, we haven't under-delivered. We have put in extra moments to communicate to our team to make sure that they feel like they are part of the wider conversation. We're bringing them in, we're making sure that it is, again, going back to the Innocent tone of voice, it's honest and it's natural. We play to the strengths of the board directors that we have, and I have to say at Innocent, we're incredibly lucky to have a senior leadership team that are very aware of their role and making sure that it feels like the hierarchy within the business is in position only. And so weekly check-ins or monthly check-ins, being really open, prioritizing comms to the right areas, the right teams. I mean, good internal communications is the right information to the right people in the right way. And for me, at the moment, because again, we're all human, we're all in exactly the same place, that means telling everybody everything all the time. And don't be afraid to do that. Open, communicate completely means that everyone feels again that they're being brought back into I matter.
No, absolutely. And I think, Kate, you're nodding there, and I'm just going to put the next question to you because it ties in very closely to this. And the question is, what is the right amount of communication? How do you know, as you think about your communications cadence, that it's enough, or it's not too much, or it's too little? How do you get the balance right?
From my experience, I really wish there was a one simple, snappy answer and off you go and wave the magic dust and you've nailed it. I think the reality is that everybody's different and that every situation is different. But I think if you come at it from exactly what Tim just said, from a point of view of openness, of honesty and transparency, and that your intent is visible to everybody, and that the care that you have for that person is also visible, then they may not always be happy with the decisions that are made or what you're communicating, but they will at least be comfortable with how it's delivered, that they've been cared about, that they've been thought about, and that nothing is, well, you can't control everything, but nothing ever should really be a surprise. I'm thinking about it in terms of, for us, it'd be kind of selection and things like that. It's taking people on that journey with you. But that is going to look slightly different for every person. As a coach, for some people in my team, they need to be talked to at every opportunity, whether it's over WhatsApp, over the phone, face to face, on a Zoom call. But other people, they're just more happy with every now and again just touching base with them, and it would just depend on where they are, where they're at. And so it's also a little bit dependent on me to ask and to understand where they are and where they're at as well.
Absolutely. Lee or Tim, any thoughts on that one?
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think again, sorry, I keep going back to the same theme, but it's the year of honesty and authenticity, and there's lots of areas of public life we're not getting that. So we sort of crave it where we can get it, I think. And I think also we're very deeply driven by humans by a sense of justice and reciprocity, and when things appear fair, that even difficult things, they're easier to live with generally. So I think Tim's suggestion, of a company being totally honest about the good and the bad and what's possible and what's not. I think where there are no perfect answers, it's certainly one of the most workable answers.
Yeah, absolutely. Tim, did you want to add anything to that?
No, again, yeah, it absolutely rings true. The more that you make communication and as often and as available as you can, the more comfortable people feel to input. So as open as it can be and as easy in however you do that. As Kate said, WhatsApp, email, chats, whatever that is, keep it regular. People will dip them when they can.
All right, so perhaps dealing with the opposite, the question is, how do you recommend dealing with individuals who lack empathy and don't make accommodations for the special circumstances we're in today, with people fearing for their well-being, increased demands on their time from families, etc.? And that's a huge issue for a lot of people right now. Lee?
The different ways people think was explained to me brilliantly a couple of years ago by someone who said there are roughly sort of two types of people in terms of making requests. And there are those people who assume they're going to get a no, right? So they make their requests really subtly because they're frightened of getting a no. And then there are other kind of people who go around the world and they just assume, they don't worry about getting no, so they just ask things directly. And when those two kinds of people come into conflict, it can be really tough. But when you put them in the right environment or in the right situation, it works really well. And so I think the phrase not having a lot of empathy is quite a loaded phrase, really. And I think, again, reframing it to this person deals with things differently or processes the world differently. And it means taking a step back and looking at really, how do I engage that person? What things do I need to explain to that person that will help them to appear more empathetic? I'll give you one tiny example. I mean, I was doing a session once where I talked about small talk, you know, and somebody came up to me and quite seriously, he said, "Are you allowed to have small talk in a business meeting?" And I said, "Well, it's not against the law." And he said, "Well, I thought you weren't allowed to do it." And when he walked away, I wondered for how long he'd appeared to be very unempathetic to people, whereas he'd just learned an odd way of behaving, that was all.
Kate, what are your thoughts on that? How do you deal with individuals who lack empathy, particularly in our current situation?
Yeah, I think I was thinking we're so polarized in every sense and in every topic. I feel like in society at the moment, and it feels like you almost like have to pick a side, and then it gets very argumentative very quickly, and there's no kind of middle ground or ability to even have discourse across the two sides. And it's the question's interesting because it kind of assumes that their perspective is the right one, and what is right and wrong, and who says that's right and that's wrong. And so if you come at it from that point of view, that there is no right and wrong, and there just is, and actually let's just try and, I mean, this all sounds very simple, but it's very hard to do. But I think just try and keep looking at things from those different perspectives, different issues. You know, if often we react in an aggressive way or an angry way or a combative way, if we're feeling under pressure, or if we're feeling there's a fear or there's anxiety that's created by the situation. So trying to understand what that fear is, I think, can help then start that conversation. But if it's always coming at it from that point of view, you must think my way is the right way, then we're only going to be where we are now in this polarized situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Tim, have you experienced that at all at Innocent, or have you been in those situations yourself?
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the big things at the moment, well, when we first went into lockdown, it was the teams that were so upset and gutted because they were working so hard. They were working every hour that God sends just to kind of keep the business afloat. And then you also had the people that were sat at home with no marketing money to spend because there wasn't anything to do, and were staring out their window. Just so many, you know, they're both going through something, they're both struggling with something, but for completely different reasons. And then you have the people that are mortified because they can't go on their holiday, but then you've got the people that realize you're lucky enough to be going on a holiday. And you know what, you're never going to find the right balance. You have to understand that it's a journey. You have to give time to that person, and you have to give them support where you can and guide them into feeling better. And again, at Innocent, it's all about, we put a lot of focus on our L&D around managerial positions, making sure that you are a coach and that you are a mentor, and that you can really listen, support, and try and help people find their own way to a happier place.
Thank you. And on a slightly lighter note, what sort of activities would you suggest organisations arrange during lockdown to take care of the well-being of employees? Jump in, anyone who's got some great suggestions. Maybe
we have, although obviously it's currently on hold, we have Pub Club. So Pub Club is an unofficial club, which is that on the first Thursday after payday, we all go to a lovely pub near our office in northwest London, and there's a gentleman there that plays any song you tweet him, and he's basically a one-man jukebox. And we got him to do a Zoom call, and people just put in the chat that they want what songs they wanted, which instrument they wanted it to play, and it didn't cost very much. And then I said the input versus output, that was a real highlight so far for me.
Okay, thank you, Kate.
Yeah, I think I mentioned it already, but I think the kind of shuffle all songs on your whatever your music streaming app of choice is, I think is always quite interesting. And it just throws out, you know, interesting conversations, and music is something that, you know, is, we all have a difference of opinion, or there might be some connection that you never knew was there, or, it'll just open up whole worlds of conversation that you've never had before. But I think also just throwing it out to the group, because again, everybody's different. What somebody's like worst nightmare is joyous for somebody else. And so just keeping mixing it up and seeing what people like to do. And sometimes you're going to love it, and sometimes people are just not going to love it, and that's fine. And I think just mixing it up is good.
That's it. It's just it's trial and error. We show and tell. We have in our team. Another one we had was, for the first 5 minutes of our weekly meeting, we invited someone completely random from the business to come in and have that first 5 minutes, check in on them, send them on their way. Trial and error. And you know what? It might not work for you that day, but it might work for someone else. And that's all it really needs, is that kind of that lift.
Absolutely. Lee, have you got any great ideas?
Yeah, I think probably the most useful thing you could do is book a really engaging keynote speaker. I'd put that really high up on the list of activities for your team. But seriously, I've done quite a bit of work with my clients actually on engaging teams this year particularly. And I think, let me answer the question sort of the opposite, almost the negative way. What I've noted, clearly there's been a whole, we've all been on a big learning thing. And there's definitely been a sense of sort of forced fun sometimes. I think Kate said this in a way, there's been a sort of sense of forced fun working sometimes and not working. And I've definitely noticed sort of almost people doing the digital equivalent of marching people to the water cooler and saying, right, now have a fun conversation. And that's definitely not working online. I think anything that builds community in a genuine way, and also anything that feels unsupervised seems to work very well. And in a way, things that are, I can't articulate this clearly, but things that are structured, but without a purpose. So what I mean by that is there's almost like, if you like, in the same way as telling people to just network in a room never works. But if you give people 2 minutes per person, that somehow works. So not necessarily a massive output or anything, not anything necessarily measurable, but things that bring people together, create community, and accidentally create a lot of creativity, because that's what gets lost when people are not coming into contact frequently in non-business-like ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
On that, sorry, but what we say, Innocent, is everything has to be an offer. So it's not you do this, you be here. It's we are offering this thing. And you just find that people will go, they're more likely to say yes, all right, because it's offered to me, as opposed to shoved in my calendar and I'm told to be there.
Yeah, great.
Absolutely. Well, what a lovely, engaging discussion. I'm afraid we're running out of time. So on that very positive note, I think we're going to have to leave it there. But thank you to all my speakers. Thank you to Tim. Thank you to Kate, thank you to Lee, thank you all for watching and for submitting all your questions. Hope you can join us for our next virtual showcase. And if you'd like any further information about today's speakers or about organising your own event, please do contact Speakers Corner. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a great rest of the day.